So let's look at variables. We've looked at this line in some detail now, and we know that it creates a variable with a name of str, and that's equal to hello, badly spelt, playground. Now, what a variable is essentially is a kind of bucket or store for a particular value. So this str can be any value that we like, as long as it's a string, because we've talked about Swift being very sensitive to types of variables, and it's difficult to change types. So once we've created a variable, it's easy enough to update it. You just do the same line, but without the var. So I could change str to goodbye, just like that. So this creates a variable str, which is equal to, let's just get that spelt right again, hello playground, and then this changes it to goodbye. Simple as that. So a very quick challenge for you. Can you create a variable called name, which is initially equal to your name and then equal to the name of someone else on the next line? Go for it. Very simple. I hope you managed it. It's just something like var name equals Rob, and then name equals my son, Tom. There we go. So you've created a variable and you've changed its value on the next line. So these are all what are known as strings. Now you can specify the type of a variable if you want to when you define it. So if you want to make very clear this is in fact a string, then you put a colon and then string, and that just makes it really clear that this variable called name is indeed a string. Now, you don't need that if you're setting it equal to Rob, because Swift will guess that what you want this to be is a string, because it can only be a string. But you might need it if you want to, say, do something like this and create a variable without giving it an initial value. And that's perfectly fine, but you do need to specify what that is. So this unknown string variable now doesn't have a value, but we do know that it's a string. So if, for example, I try and set it equal to 3, that won't work because 3 is not a string. If, alternatively, I set it to 3 in quotes, that's absolutely fine because 3 in quotes is a string. Okay. So that's strings. The next type we're going to look at is integers, which, if you remember from your math lessons, are whole numbers. So if we create a variable called int, for example, and set it equal to 4, that will initially have a type of integer. And that will allow us to do all sorts of maths on it. So if I want to do 3 times int, then it will do that for me and give me the answer 12. So here's a very quick challenge for you. Can you create a variable called a, which is equal to 5, and then a variable called b, which is equal to a multiplied by 3? I hope you managed it. All you need to do is var a is equal to 5, and then var b is equal to a times 3. And you can see we've got the 5 and 15 there. Notice the spaces I'm putting in here aren't necessary. If I get rid of those, the code works fine. But it is really good to get into a habit of making good-looking code. So that's code that's easy to read, essentially. So I would always try and put spaces in there to keep things tidy. And of course, if we want to specify the type of this, we can, and we just use a colon int to clarify that this is indeed an int. So integers are great as long as you know that the variable that you're creating only ever needs to be a whole number. So you might use that if you're counting something, the number of users in your database or the number of levels in your game or something like that. But of course, there are lots of numbers that aren't necessarily always whole numbers. And we can use those by introducing, let's say, a c. Now, interestingly, if I set c equal to 5 divided by 2, and that slash is a divide sign, so 5 divided by 2, initially Swift gives us the value of 2. Because what it's doing is it's interpreting that because we start the definition with a 5, that c is going to be an integer, and then it does 5 divided by 2, which is 2.5, and rounds down to 2. So c is actually an integer here. But we presumably don't want c to be an integer. If we're doing 5 divided by 2, we want it to be 2.5. So the variable type we're going to use for this is a double. And a double variable essentially is a decimal variable. It can be a whole number, but it's also a decimal. And you can have a bit of fun with integers and doubles as well. So if, for example, you want to double c, let's say, you want to double the double. So you just type c times 2. Now that's fine, that gives you 5.0. Notice the 0.0 there. When we've got a double, it always returns as a decimal, so there will always be a 0.0, even if it's a whole number. So c times 2 gives you that. C times 4 gives you 10, which makes sense. Now, remember our int variable is equal to 4. If we try and do c times int, then you would have thought that would give you 10. But although it does give you the correct answer, it also gives you an error because you can't combine integers and doubles in the same sum. Even though they're both numbers and we know that we can multiply them together, Swift won't allow you to do that. You can't multiply doubles and integers. So what you'd have to do is to convert your integer into a double. And you can do that easy enough using the double function. So you just type double with a capital D and then int. And that then converts your integer int into a double, which allows us to multiply it by c. So just be careful there. Some people get confused when they try and multiply numbers together and they get an error. The reason is often because they're multiplying two different types of numbers. Okay, you'll be relieved to hear that that's all the different variable types we're going to look at. That will get you a very long way, really. There are other variable types in Swift, there are many, but those three are really the core of what you work with day in, day out. So the only other thing I'd like to show you is embedding strings and numbers inside other strings. So, for example, if we wanted to create a long sentence which was made up of str and name, then we can just put str plus name. And that will give us goodbye, Tom. Because str is goodbye and name is Tom, because I updated it there. So that gives us goodbye, Tom, which is all fine, except we could do with a space in the middle. So very quick challenge. Can you work out how to put a space in between goodbye and Tom? I hope you figured it out. All you need to do is put space in string there, and now we get goodbye, Tom. So that's how you combine or concatenate, to use the posh term in programming terms, concatenate two variables. You put them together with the plus sign. That's just the same as JavaScript and lots of other languages. And finally, for this video, what if you want to put an int or a double inside a sentence? Well, we actually saw that in the cat app. We did do it, so hopefully you can remember how to do it. So I'll just show you. New string is equal to my son is, and let's just show you, if I try and do plus int, it won't like that because int is not a string and you can only combine strings in this way. So I have to put my int into the string, which we do using this really handy feature with a backslash and brackets, and then our variable there, my son is 4. Okay, let's get rid of this, because I'm going to give you a final challenge for this video, which will hopefully use most of what we've covered so far. What I want you to do is to create 3 variables, A, B, and C. I want A to be equal to 3.5. Write that down if you're unlikely to remember it. So A to be equal to 3.5, B to be equal to 4, and then C to be equal to the multiple of 3.5 and 4, which is 14. And then I want you to create a string which says 3.5 times 4 is equal to 14, only using the variables A, B, and C. I'll recap that. A is 3.5, B is 4, C is 14, which is the multiple of 3.5 and 4, and I want you to create a final sentence which says 3.5 times 4 is equal to 14, using those variables. Go for it. All right, I hope you managed it. So the first bit's easy enough. So A is equal to 3.5. A is a double, of course. And let's create B is equal to 4. So B is an integer. And now we're going to create C. And I'm going to create that from A and B. So I might start by saying C is equal to A and B. But of course I'll get an error because B is an integer. So I need to convert B into a double first. And now I wanted a string saying that 3.5 times 4 is equal to 14. So I'll just call it str. And then I want to bring A in there. So I use backslash and then A in brackets times backslash B in brackets is backslash C. So 3.5 times 4 is 14. I hope that's been fairly clear for you. If there was anything that was confusing, please do go back and watch the video again. But that was just a brief introduction to variables using Swift. In the next video, we'll go on to look at arrays and dictionaries.